This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live.
Good afternoon and welcome to the show. Thanks so much for joining me this Sunday, the 19th of May on Teachers Talk Radio. You are listening live to Just a Classroom Teacher podcast. Joining the discussion now across the next 90 minutes, where we shall challenge stigmas and celebrate the role of our classroom teachers and heroes. Please do get involved, text in.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live. Tune in live at ttradio.org, or to join in the conversation, download the Podbean app and search Teachers Talk Radio. Follow the hashtag TTRadio. Tune in, talk it out with Teachers Talk Radio.
Good afternoon all, and welcome to my debut podcast this evening or this afternoon in the UK, Just a Classroom Teacher, the podcast where we will challenge the stigma around remaining in the classroom and celebrate the incredible impact of those who choose to stay. I'm your host this afternoon, Sarah Kate Towlson, and I'm absolutely thrilled to have you join me on this debut podcast and this journey thanks to Teachers Talk Radio. Please do get involved this afternoon, send in texts, tell us your name and whereabouts you are in the world, and feel free to call in live as well, and we'll be happy to share your thoughts and get you live on the show this afternoon. So I wanted to start off then the show today with setting the scene a little bit. So why have I chosen for my debut podcast Just a Classroom Teacher as the title this afternoon? I'm currently in middle leadership over in Abu Dhabi, working internationally, but have spent many years in the UK. Over a decade, in fact. Wow, that makes me feel very old. As a successful middle leader and thriving both pastorally and in curriculum development roles as well. I really have a deep passion for leadership and management and a constant thirst for knowledge as well, thanks to my leadership gurus such as Nick Hart, for example, who I'm a huge advocate of at the moment, Jenny Donahue and James Hilton, amongst others. My leadership today, I love nothing more than keeping abreast, both in my teaching and leadership roles, actually, of the latest pedagogy, philosophies and change management strategies, actually, and real life success stories and how they come about in practice, within departments, within middle leadership and in the classroom, more importantly. Having completed my NPQSL, that was over 4 years ago now, and having led departments in mainly modern foreign languages through curriculum experience, through significant periods of change and expansion as well, particularly over the past 3 years in my role over in a developing school in the United Arab Emirates. So my leadership experience and wealth of knowledge here is really helped me to grow and flourish as a leader. However, despite my achievements and my ambition in leadership to date, I've made the tough really more tough than it ought to be, and something which I've been toying with the idea of for many months really now. But the decision to focus now my efforts back into the classroom as of next academic year. So why, you might ask? Common thoughts. Am I pregnant? Am I bored? Am I comfortable and no longer need the money? Perhaps, I wish. The answer to all of these is no, actually. And the reason, I can't narrow it down to one reason, but one of the reasons is because I'm also a really good classroom teacher. And I've realized that actually this is where I feel most fulfilled. And this is where I see the direct impact day to day and where I feel most rewarded as a teacher and a professional through the students in front of me. The opportunities across the globe now, and particularly out here in the UAE for teaching and learning, are endless as a profession and really quite exciting, I think. I'm deeply passionate and a huge advocate of getting the balance right between research and practice. I think, unfortunately, there are teachers who use the research alone. And as we know, it's not viable. We need to be able to use the reading and research, which we have in abundance now, and to really put that into practice and challenge it and make sure that it's working for the individuals in front of us in a classroom setting. I've thought that if I would continue to climb this almost metaphorical career ladder in education, particularly from the era, again, sounding very old here, but the era that I've trained to be a teacher in and grown up in, was the idea of, progression being from teacher to middle leader, from middle leader to senior leader. And I guess a traditional pathway in its sense. But if I were to follow that pathway, I would essentially be cutting my time and experience in the classroom by progressing into a senior leadership role. And that for me would implicate missing out on the chance to put all of this amazing cutting edge research and incredible CPD that's available now into practice. So in short, this podcast this afternoon, guys, is really born out of my desire to explore and discuss these choices that we have as professionals and as teachers, not just for myself, but for all of the amazing teachers out there who might feel the same way, who may have had experiences like this before and be able to share their experiences on our text in today and calling in as well. And also I want to challenge that stigma a little bit of what success looks like for teachers in education. And I'm hoping that we can see kind of both sides of the coin through my special guests that have very kindly agreed to come on the show today. So without further ado, let's dive into today's episode and begin this really important conversation. Okay, before we hand over to our amazing friends and sponsors for our first adverts, I just want to pose a few questions to you guys as my amazing audience tonight. The first one being, what does the phrase stepping down mean to you? Have you relinquished a leadership role recently, or how did you feel about it if you have or are in that position? And do you feel challenged as a teacher or educator in the role that you're in and fulfilled? I also want to add one more question to you just before we break for our amazing sponsors here. And that's to any ECTs out there or anybody new to teaching. How do you perceive your future careers? What does progression and success look like to you? So I'm going to leave it there for a very quick break with our amazing sponsors. Have a think, and please do get involved on the text. Can't wait to hear your thoughts.
Reading Solutions UK. Are you looking for best practices and innovative strategies to foster confident, lifelong readers? Join the free online International Reading Conference on the 11th, 12th and 13th of June. Hear from speakers like TV personality and education expert Basit Siddiqui, beloved children's author Michael Rosen, fluency expert Tim Rosinski, EEF specialist Chloe Butlin, the National Literacy Trust's Irene Picton, and a range of experienced practitioners, including MAT leaders, deputy heads, heads of English, high-level teaching assistants, and school librarians. Through the 3-day conference, speakers will explore a range of topics at the forefront of the current educational landscape, with sessions relevant for all educators and key stages. Visit Reading Solutions at readingsolutionsuk.co.uk for more information and to sign up for this free conference.
Amazing. Thank you so much to our sponsors and friends here at Teachers Talk Radio. Okay, so now I want to talk briefly then about the stigma that we've mentioned here, the potential stigma, of course, surrounding just staying in the classroom. And the reason that I'm emphasizing, I hope I am, the just here is because obviously it's a kind of a play on words in my head, you know. Of course, we know as teachers, as classroom practitioners, and any of us working in education with or within the classroom, that there's nothing just about being a classroom teacher. You know, that it's such a complex role, but such a fulfilling role as well. And I remember when I made the decision earlier this academic year to relinquish my position in middle leadership. And I remember a colleague commenting to me and saying, Sarah, you're so passionate and you're so ambitious. Will you just not get bored? And I reflected on that a lot. And I thought, bored? How could you ever get bored as a teacher? You know, it's funny, the classic meme that's on social media where it says about something about, you know, teachers make more decisions in the space of a minute than brain surgeons. Now, how scientifically correct that is, I'm unsure, but, you know, we can all appreciate that, having been in the classroom and working in the education setting. So in terms of, you know, am I feeling challenged as a classroom teacher? Well, absolutely. Every single day, every single cohort and every single child that's in front of me is a new challenge for me and for every classroom teacher. So the stigma surrounding it, I'd be really interested to know where you think that has been born from in education, really, and whether you've experienced it yourselves. As I say, please do get involved on the text and call in as well. So I'm going to go straight in now with our special guest, who is an absolute inspiration for me. She unfortunately couldn't be here live on the show this afternoon because I think she's going to a comedy fest actually in Abu Dhabi. But she was absolutely gutted because she's so flattered to be part of this discussion and feels so passionate towards the topic as well. So I'm going to play a very quick pre-recorded interview. I managed to catch Aoife Barry, one of my colleagues at school. She's a year 2 phenomenal classroom teacher with lots of years under her belt. And I just think that this clip in itself is real testament to all of the amazing, dedicated teachers out there who find fulfillment every day inside their own classroom. Hi Aoife, how are you?
I'm great, Sarah. Thank you so much for having me today.
No, thank you so much for coming on our show. So just a couple of questions I wanted to go through from some of the people on social media who are obviously very intrigued and want your view on the topic that we're talking about today. So what inspired you then to stay in the classroom rather than pursue a path into middle or senior leadership?
I genuinely felt that the classroom was my calling. It's where I felt most comfortable. It's where I felt I had the most impact and where I had the most reach, being within the classroom, working with my 24 to 30 children. All along when I was a younger teacher going through my career, I think there was always the assumption, not that there was the expectation, there was just the assumption that I would go on to do great things. And people would think of doing great things as migrating into leadership. But I always felt that doing great things for me meant staying in the classroom. I felt that that's where I belonged. I enjoy it. I get so much from the children. I genuinely feel that I get back what I put in, and I have never had the desire to leave the classroom.
Interesting and amazing to hear that as well, and obviously I've seen you in action, having the pleasure of working with you as well, Aoife, and I think that you're absolutely right. I feel the same. I think you talked to me the other day about the fact that we have been trained as teachers, and I feel very much like that. And everything else is an extra, really. And I'm certainly not trained in business management or HR, and I feel exactly the same when I'm in the classroom. How many years have you been teaching, Aoife?
I will be starting my 18th year in the classroom in September.
That's impressive.
18 consecutive years, and you know, it's been such a journey. And you know, it's interesting, just this topic that you're 18 years and why didn't you ever, people think there's something wrong with you, that you took the lazy route out, it's just easier, is it? No, it's not easier. I can assure you, and every teacher working in the classroom can assure you, that being a classroom teacher is not easy route. But it's that assumption that you got complacent, you got lazy, and you just got settled. But I just felt, Sarah, year on year, I was growing, I was learning, I was honing my own skills, I was bettering myself as a teacher, as an educator. And I've had so many fantastic experiences in those 17 going on 18 years. I taught at home in Ireland for 6 years. I taught in a government experienced school when I moved to the Middle East, and now I have this brand new opportunity, and I have learned so much, and I have grown so much, and my practice has improved so much for it. So it's not that I've ever become complacent, it's not that I've ever become lazy. I've just gone down these new routes, and it's opened so many new opportunities and exciting learning for me as a teacher as well.
Absolutely. And like you say, making your own challenges, I think, and feeling fulfilled by the job that you're doing day in, day out, and that's what's important. Have you ever felt, just picking up on what you said, have you ever felt pressure in your role to sort of apply for any looming middle leadership roles or senior leadership roles?
I have never felt the pressure within my schools. My schools have been very gracious. They've offered me opportunities, they've advertised opportunities, they've presented opportunities, but I've never been pushed or encouraged unwillfully. I feel there has been a societal pressure. You're in your late 30s and you're still in the classroom. It's almost, why? Why not? Why didn't you climb the ladder? Why didn't you open another door? And I did open new doors in different ways. I as a classroom teacher, I feel that I've been able to choose the opportunities that I want and that I want to give to my class and give to my school. I find that by being a classroom teacher, by doing what I absolutely love, by being here on the ground working with these little children, I can provide new opportunities. I can enrich my school at the grassroots level. I can be that teacher that's on board with everything, and I can be the teacher that can go and support and help with the volleyball or the PE, or I can be the parent, the teacher that supports the parent who needs advice on how to support their child with their learning at home. Because I'm in the classroom and I'm teaching that content, I can be available to enrich the school experience for children by starting a new club or starting a new choir, because I'm at that grassroots level and I'm listening to the children and I'm listening to the parents and I'm on board, and I want to help grow and support my school in those kinds of ways.
Absolutely, amazing. And I think you're right when you say about the societal pressures as well, and it is, I've had that question recently, why are you stepping down? And what do you think about that terminology, stepping down?
It's almost like you've done something terrible.
Right.
Like, you're stepping down. You must have
It's
insulted
very
someone.
negative,
Everyone thinks that there's a negative connotation with that. And there is, you've gone down this avenue. Perhaps you want to pursue other routes, other interests. Perhaps you've seen a gap somewhere that you want to invest yourself, your time in, to actually grow within your career, to actually improve and better your school and take things in a new direction. Or maybe you feel you've outgrown something. I don't feel I've outgrown the classroom.
No, I'm the same and never will, because there's so many challenges you presented each year with each different student that you can never get bored.
Exactly, and every year is different. New faces, new personalities, and it's all about what you're doing for yourself as a lifelong learner. I've been in year 2 now for 3 years, and no year has been the same. Like, for example, now this year, I'm teaching so long, I'm going on my 18th year teaching. In that 18 years, my length of experience has stood to me in that, when I was a young teacher, maybe I talked the talk but I couldn't walk the walk, because hindsight and years of experience have taught me that in those 18 years I have worked with children with ADHD, ASD, Down syndrome, challenging behaviour, and it's all of these learning curves that I've learned to understand and adapt to in my 18 years that have made me a better practitioner and a better teacher today. And I have greater understanding of my students, I have greater empathy, I have greater patience, and all of these things are feeding into who I am as a teacher and what I can do for my children. And that 18 years experience, if I had left the classroom or had that gap in my experience, maybe I wouldn't have the strength of skill that I have today. And that's what I mean by every year is different. This year I have different children, different personalities, different needs. So I have been doing my own research. I've been bettering myself, improving, growing my knowledge base, so I can then support a particular student, then tend to his or her needs, and that's how I am growing myself year on year. Through experience, through the children and what they need from me, and how can I be better for them.
Absolutely. And I think for me, there's so many negative connotations, I think, sometimes in the press, and if you just look at the statistics of the amount of people leaving teaching as a profession, and we all understand why. We live it day in, day out, the stresses, the increased pressures, the differing needs, as you were talking about. But to hear the flip side of that, and there's a reason why we love it so much. There's a reason why we all come to school every day and work with these students. And I think, like you, continuing professional development, your own professional development and career focus
You're
is
tailoring
absolutely,
your professional development to
is so important.
How can you be the best version of you for your children?
For the people,
and this year I might need to focus on a certain area and research that and grow my knowledge base. And then next year I'll have a completely different cohort, and I will have to upskill myself to support them in whatever way I can. So every year is so different. So much variety.
Oh, thank you so much for your time today, Aoife. You've been amazing, and we'll catch up soon. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you so much to Aoife Barry again, who gave up her time on Friday when we were all wanting to leave for the weekend, and sat and recorded that for us because she couldn't, unfortunately, be with us this afternoon. So amazing. Thank you so much, Aoife. So much to pick out of that conversation with Aoife there, and how refreshing is it to hear such passion and enthusiasm from somebody who's been in the game 18 years of teaching, and I just think that is absolutely amazing to hear. Some of the things I wanted to pick out of that conversation from Aoife, lifelong learner, how many times have we advocated that as teachers to our students and to the next generation of the importance of skills for lifelong learning. And I love the fact that Aoife picked up on that in terms of our own professional development as teachers and professionals as well, which is, of course, vitally important in our growth and job satisfaction. And fulfillment as well. And the idea as well of opening doors in different ways, I really liked that. And it's absolutely true, isn't it? I touched upon at the start of the show tonight, the idea that every day is different, that you're presented with so many challenges, and the doors can be opened in different ways. It doesn't have to be the stereotypical societal stigma, pressure, whatever you want to call it, of climbing the ladder in the traditional way in education. So thank you again to Aoife for that. Now we're going to take a quick break. Please keep listening to our amazing friends and sponsors from Teachers Talk Radio and afar, because there are some amazing opportunities for teachers through these sponsors. And then we're going to reconvene. I want to just leave you with the thoughts that Aoife had and what she said, and also with the recent news that I read just yesterday, in fact, that 1 in 3 heads and teachers now are, according to the DfE survey recently, quitting. They're unhappy with workload mainly and pay, and don't feel valued by policymakers was the big one. This number is actually up from 2022 by 25% of those teachers and leaders looking to leave the profession in the next 12 months. A really sad but impactful thought as we move into our ad break.
Reading Solutions UK. Are you looking for best practices and innovative strategies to foster confident, lifelong readers? Join the free online International Reading Conference on the 11th, 12th and 13th of June. Hear from speakers like TV personality and education expert Basit Siddiqui, beloved children's author Michael Rosen, fluency expert Tim Rosinski, EEF specialist Chloe Butlin, the National Literacy Trust's Irene Picton, and a range of experienced practitioners, including MAT leaders, deputy heads, heads of English, high-level teaching assistants, and school librarians. Through the 3-day conference, speakers will explore a range of topics at the forefront of the current educational landscape, with sessions relevant for all educators and key stages. Visit Reading Solutions at readingsolutionsuk.co.uk for more information and to sign up for this free conference.
Fantastic. Thank you again to our sponsors at Teachers Talk Radio. Okay, let's delve into this podcast a little bit further as we look to invite our next special guest on tonight. So having looked at, in short, the stigma potentially surrounding the career ladder, if you like, in teaching, traditionally and perhaps still nowadays, the questions that you may get asked as classroom teachers: why didn't you climb the ladder? Why not? Why are you taking the lazy route? Is this not improving your practice? Will you get bored? All of these negative connotations that we've heard so far, I want us now to have a look and delve a little bit deeper into this from a different role in the school setting, and that of senior leadership. Thinking about the headline figure that I left you with just before our sponsors, I want to invite now, and I'm very privileged to do so because she's one of my bestest friends and also absolute inspiration, Sarah Curtis, who is principal of an infant school at the moment in Derbyshire, and she'll tell you much more about her role than I will do. But I want to invite her on today and thank her in advance for giving up her time, her special time with her family, as we all know, as teachers on a Sunday afternoon, to have a look at her journey from TA to principal, and also to challenge the idea of reframing the success around just being a classroom teacher. So without further ado, I would like to welcome Sarah Curtis, principal, onto my debut podcast this afternoon. Welcome, Sarah.
Hi, Sarah. Thank you for having me.
Oh, absolute pleasure. Absolute pleasure. Thank you for being here with us. So I'm going to stop talking for a little bit, Sarah, and hand over to you. Now, I have given the listeners a bit of a sneak preview into your journey in terms of your career, but I would love it if you could just give us a summary of how you got to the position that you're in now, please, because I think it's an amazing story.
Thank you. So I'm currently a principal of an infant school, which is not where I'd imagined I'd be in my career at this moment, but it is a place where I had strived to be. I used to always say I want to be head by 40, and I managed to make that just about. Growing up, I did lots of different jobs, worked in a variety of different sectors, and never really found something that I was passionate about. Moved around jobs quite a few times, and just never really felt the fire in my belly for any particular career. I then I then had my first child, and started working as a teaching assistant in a secondary school. And then I was there for about 12 months and also went on to have my second child. I was also leading a brownie group at the time. and just started to feel I was really enjoying working with the children, the secondary children and the sort of brownie age 7-year-olds, and just thought, actually, this is what I want to do. So in 2014, I went and did my PGCE. I absolutely loved it, and actually felt I was quite good at it, which is a weird thing to say, isn't it? You said it earlier
Not
on
at
as
all,
well.
no.
And
We
you
can
just
be modest, it's okay. Yeah.
absolutely. You just think, actually, yeah, I am quite good at this. I put the rest down to, and I always say this, right place, right time, to be honest, and right school. So my first school as an ECT, it was a new school. So it didn't have many teachers, it didn't have many children, but the support was phenomenal. The head teacher there was an inspiration. She was quite a young head as well. The CPD that was on offer was fantastic. And within my second year of teaching, I was Key Stage 1 lead. And that was partly down to the opportunity and the fact there wasn't many teachers within the school, but partly down to the passion in my belly that I had. I just felt like I could absolutely make a difference to more children's lives, having a bigger responsibility, really. I stayed there for 4 years and then started applying for deputy jobs, assistant head jobs. And then I got my first deputy role in 2019. So I'd been teaching 5 years. And then was made interim head in 2022. And then I accepted after a lot of deliberation, I must add, I accepted the permanent position in just last year in 2023. So yeah, a quick sort of 9-year turnaround from 10 years from TA to principal, but I love it. I do love it, and I am proud. So yeah.
So you should be. What an amazing story. And actually, we'll share with listeners as well, Sarah, that you used to TA in my French lesson, didn't you? Back in the day.
And
yeah.
You inspired me as well.
Oh, I don't know.
That's why you're still in my life now.
But I mean, what a journey, what a route as well. Now, I just want to, there's so much to talk about here. So, right, I'm going to go straight into pick up on a point that you mentioned there, Sarah, about taking on more responsibility. I think it was when you mentioned you step up into middle leaderships, taking more responsibility. You had that fire in your belly, as you describe it. And we all know what that means as passionate teachers. And that enabling you to influence more students than just being purely in the classroom. And I think that's a really interesting sort of counter argument as well. The idea of course, as you progress into middle leadership, particularly, and and senior leadership as well, it's that idea of having a bigger impact, isn't it? A departmental impact or a whole school impact as well. And I think that's really important to mention as passionate classroom teachers as well as leaders as well. And particularly, like you say, in a school maybe where that needs a little bit more direction, or in a growing school or a new school where there are those opportunities. I think that's a really important point to pick up on as well, that it's not just being in the classroom that can have that impact on students' lives, well-beings and futures. It's so much more than that as well, and we get that through leadership roles. Can I take you back, Sarah, to what I left the listeners with just before we had our sponsors on, which was the concerning, shocking, however you want to describe it, figures at the moment that the DfE have published about 1 in 3 heads and teachers considering quitting the profession as of next year. Are you experiencing that? And I don't mean just you. Are you wanting to quit? I mean, you don't have to say live on air. No, in your day-to-day job, as principal, as leader, are you seeing that negativity from your staff, or not so much?
I wouldn't like to say that I am, to be honest. I think I'm quite lucky. I'm part of a trust, and a lot of the networking I do is within the trust, and they very much pride themselves on being a good place to work, a great place to work. And actually, I don't have many conversations with staff, or I don't have that, oh, it's May the 31st, how many resignations am I going to get, sort of dread that I think some head teachers might feel or experience. I personally don't see it reflected in sort of my local world, but it doesn't mean that they don't consider it.
Yeah, and I think, you know, that's credit to your school and to the culture that you've built, I guess, you know, in the school, and how your staff feel as well. And as you said, that, you know, it will be happening in other schools and in other classrooms, I'm sure. Let's just talk about you personally, Sarah. So have you ever felt pressured? I mean, from what you were just saying now, it was very much intrinsic for you in terms of your ambition and the pressure that you put on yourself and to go for the next step, and that feeling that you got inside your belly. But have you ever felt any external pressures in the world of education to do that?
I think there's definitely a pressure there. Just like Aoife was saying earlier, people sort of saying, oh, you're still just a teacher, and they almost think then, oh, you mustn't be very good. Because if you were a good teacher, you would have progressed, and actually that's totally not the case. And I've got a middle leader in my school who's desperate for senior leadership role, and I try to encourage her as much as possible, but at the same time I want to retain her in the classroom because she's such a phenomenal classroom teacher. So I think that that the pressure is definitely an undertone. There is an undertone of pressure. I don't think many people openly talk about it. For me, my pressure was definitely for me, and it was for me to sort of catch up in my career where I felt I should have been at this age, because I'd bitted and bobbed through doing various jobs. It was almost the pressure for me to be where I needed to be at this stage in my life with 2 children. And if I'd chosen this route from leaving university, this is where I would want to have been now. And it's definitely more around that side of it than the external pressure. I think financially the pressure is there. We all know that teachers don't get paid very well for the hours that they work. So actually there is a bit of a financial pressure there, taking on a TLR or taking on a middle leadership role. But then at the same time, you've got the workload that comes with that. And whether we can all fit that into our work-life balance and still keep our sanity at the same time. I think there's a lot to consider around the transitions between them. I read, it was actually a present I got for Christmas one year. It was a book called Making the Leap by Jill Barry, and it talked about your spheres of influence and how those transitions from classroom teacher to middle leader to senior leader, and how many people you can influence, how many lives you can affect. And actually, I was very keen to start developing teaching and learning, the curriculum, lots of pastoral support and inclusion. I'm a big advocate for inclusion and pastoral. And I thought, actually, as a classroom teacher, I can do that within my classroom and I can influence the lives within my classroom. But I care about all of the children in this school. So how can I influence their lives and have a greater impact on all of their lives, not just the 30 in front of me?
Yeah. No, I completely appreciate that and understand it. And as well, I think that training and experience, I mean, this is another thing that I thought a lot about over the past few years. And I'm sure we all know members, and this isn't aimed at you, Sarah, by any stretch of the imagination, but you know, we've all been in schools or know of teachers who have very little experience in the classroom, who are promoted very quickly, and you know, often to be amazing leaders and managers. But sometimes I wonder, and this personally has happened to me as well, if I think back to my career in the second year of teaching at 24, I must have been then, I was given the opportunity to take a middle leadership role. And I'd only been teaching, really for a year. And I just think, what training was I given there? What skills? Because like you said, it's a completely different skill set, isn't it? Okay, we've discussed just a classroom teacher there's no just about it in terms of the talent and everything that goes with it, the skills and the knowledge and the pedagogy that you need to stay on top of. But it's a completely different skill set, isn't it, when you move into leadership roles as well? Would you agree that some teachers are being fast-tracked into senior leadership, perhaps without the adequate training?
Absolutely. And I think there's the DFE report that talks about pathways into teaching did a study on fast trackers, young heads' career changes, and absolutely that is the case. And that's down to, again, it goes back to the retention of quality staff and the statistic that you posed earlier around 1 in 3 quitting, that we need more leaders within the school system, but actually we also need some really high quality teachers as well. And that's not to say that just because you get promoted quite quickly that you shouldn't have been, but in a lot of cases, and I think it might happen more in larger schools, particularly maybe secondary schools, which I don't have a lot of experience in. I think primary schools in particular, you get the staff or the leaders that stay for a longer period of time. I haven't got the statistics on that, so don't quote me on how accurate that is, but it's just the feeling that I get. And I just think, yeah, absolutely, there is some fast tracking happening, and I think the average age of leaders and school leaders is coming down.
And I wonder if that's partly due to the fact that classroom teachers perhaps don't get the recognition, and they feel we've talked about societal pressures and the stigma surrounding it, but maybe they feel, for example, I feel fulfilled every day in terms of what I get from the students in front of me. But is it the fact that they don't feel challenged enough in their own continued professional development, that the culture within the establishment is not supporting them to be an excellent classroom teacher? We used to have, I was looking into this last night actually, what were they called? You'll know this, Sarah. The lead teachers that we used to have. I think the government ended the scheme. That's it. Yeah. So they got rid of the scheme a few years ago, and it's probably I don't know. I'm not going to sit here and pretend I'm an expert on it, but I would imagine financially was why they had to cut the positions. But I mean, what a role. That was something when I started teaching that I really aspired to be, because for me that is the pinnacle of, I'm trained to be a teacher, but that is you are recognized as an advanced skills teacher in your field, which is something I think to be particularly proud of. Is there anything like that exists in your school, in your setting, in terms of we
have various different roles that come with either pay or actually just for experience and just for training, and it's to do with implementing the curriculum. It can be to do with being mentoring roles, coaching roles, and I think that all of those are similar, but the idea of being an advanced teacher has gone. It's more around having that TLR, or have you progressed to upper pay scale? How have you proved yourself that way? And that again is the wrong attitude to have, isn't it? But also, shouldn't all classroom teachers be skilled? So to have a few that are advanced skills, it's in a way that's then
take it away
from all those other teachers who haven't applied for that, or who don't want that, who are just as skilled, but they maybe haven't got the confidence, or they haven't got their foot in the right their finger in the right pie.
Their face doesn't fit, or
are those teachers any better than the rest? And actually, everybody should be given the correct opportunities to thrive, and the correct support, the correct coaching, something more specific. Specific leadership in terms of I'm leading a certain subject, or I'm leading a certain part of the curriculum, or I'm going to lead on behaviour and inclusion. And yes, I am just a classroom teacher, but I am phenomenal at this particular area, and I want to share that with my peers. I want to share that within my local network. That, in a way, is just as powerful as having that title, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree more, Sarah. No, you're right. And we're going to move on after the news into sort of this idea of reframing success for classroom teachers as well. And you've touched upon it there with the idea of, the CPD and the promoting of these exceptional teachers. And I want to touch on some quality assurance questions for you as well. But we need some questions from our listeners this afternoon. So I'm going to allow you now to text in, please, and give us some questions, pose some questions to our wonderful special guest, Sarah Curtis, this afternoon, or just share your experiences. Have you had a similar experience to Sarah? Or are you a classroom teacher currently and want some top tips and advice from our guest tonight? Or even ECTs, have we got any newly qualified teachers on here that are listening this afternoon? Because I think it'd be really interesting and insightful to hear. I'm an old school teacher, I guess, now at 14 years in the job, but it'd be really nice to see whether there are those pressures and that stigma that I've felt during my career for an ECT as well. So something interesting to leave you with, and please do get involved. So you can text in, call in as well, but please remember to text and call in. You do need to make sure that you are doing it from your mobile phone and not from any other device. You will need the Podbean app. Okay, Sarah, go and get a cup of tea, listen in to our amazing sponsors and the news, and we'll continue this amazing conversation shortly. Okay.
Thanks, Sarah.
Reading Solutions UK. Are you looking for best practices and innovative strategies to foster confident, lifelong readers? Join the free online International Reading Conference on the 11th, 12th and 13th of June. Hear from speakers like TV personality and education expert Basit Siddiqui, beloved children's author Michael Rosen, fluency expert Tim Rosinski, EEF specialist Chloe Butlin, the National Literacy Trust's Irene Picton, and a range of experienced practitioners, including MAT leaders, deputy heads, heads of English, high-level teaching assistants, and school librarians. Through the 3-day conference, speakers will explore a range of topics at the forefront of the current educational landscape, with sessions relevant for all educators and key stages. Visit Reading Solutions at readingsolutionsuk.co.uk for more information and to sign up for this free conference.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and this is Teachers Talk Radio News.
The BBC reports on proposed changes to sex and relationship education guidance for schools in England. According to the report on the news website, government sources have told the BBC about the plans, which include banning sex education for under 9s, as well as additional guidance for teaching about gender identity. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak said the new guidance would ensure children were not exposed to disturbing content. Teachers have responded with concerns that some of the guidance appears contradictory and say there is no evidence of a widespread problem with current guidance. The new plans say secondary school pupils will learn about protected characteristics such as sexual orientation and gender reassignment, but makes it clear that schools should not teach about the concept of gender identity. It said it was right to take a cautious approach. Education Secretary Gillian Keegan, speaking on BBC Breakfast, said biological sex is the basis of relationship, sex and health education, not these contested views. ASCL's General Secretary said that it was important that banning the teaching of gender identity did not shut down discussion, and that young people must be able to discuss this without their teachers feeling in peril of saying something wrong. The new guidance also strengthens rules to make it easier for parents to access teaching materials to see what their children are learning, although many point out that this guidance is currently in place. Lucy Emerson of the Sex Education Forum said, "If topics were to be restricted, it will leave children even more dependent on getting answers from online sources." The draft guidance is now open to a 9-week consultation, but once finalised will be statutory. An outline of the proposed new age restrictions can be found on the BBC News website and the consultation on the Department for Education website. In the United States, pro-Palestinian protests at colleges and universities have made the news again, as some graduates from Duke University in North Carolina staged a walkout. The protest came just prior to a speech by veteran comedian Jerry Seinfeld, who was due to receive an honorary degree. Mr. Seinfeld has been a vocal supporter of Israel since the 7th of October attacks by Hamas. Some students stayed to hear the speech, but videos posted on social media also showed some booing and chanting slogans in support of Palestine. Whilst the ceremony at Duke went ahead, plans at other universities, including Columbia and the University of Southern California, have cancelled or restructured their main graduation ceremonies to avoid further complications. The Daily Mirror features comments from Strictly Judge Shirley Ballas about free school meals. She focuses on her own experiences of being raised by a single mother and says she understands what increasing numbers of British children living in poverty are going through. She recalls looking forward to her free school meal, referring to it as a nice lunch every day. At 63, Ms. Ballas is hoping to use her experiences to highlight the issue of poverty by being part of an ITV documentary called Kids in Poverty. According to the Mirror, 4.3 million children in Britain get their only meal a day at school. 30% of UK children are living below the poverty line, with 1 million classed as being in extreme poverty. Figures from the Joseph Rowntree Foundation say that the share of children living in absolute poverty has increased by 148% since 2017 and is at its highest level for 30 years. The documentary can be seen on demand, and full details of the article from the Mirror are on its website. Finally, students at Lancaster University have voted for all food served on campus to be plant-based, according to BBC Radio Lancashire. The Students' Union is supporting the gradual transition to 100% vegan menus, with a target of 50% by 2025 and 100% by 2027. A campaigner told the BBC that Lancaster University has a goal of net zero by 2035 and that implementing a plant-based catering system aligns with this goal. The Countryside Alliance said too few students had been involved in the decision, with 18 of the 19 delegates on the Students' Union Council, who do represent 13,000 students, voting to support the motion. But the Countryside Alliance called it an attack on freedom of choice and said the decision should have been put to a wider student vote. Universities including Stirling, Warwick and Newcastle have also voted to go plant-based, although Edinburgh rejected the plan. The votes have been organised following Animal Rising's Plant-Based Universities campaign. This has been your Teachers Talk Radio News with Jo Fox.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Jo, for the news. Amazing. Right, we're going to continue then. Just a quick summary for those of you who perhaps have had a quick cup of tea making or have just joined us this afternoon on your Sunday evening. Thank you once again to Teachers Talk Radio for this opportunity for my debut podcast, and also to all of the listeners who have tuned in this afternoon on your Sunday afternoons. We're joined by Sarah Curtis, Principal from Derbyshire, UK, who has been discussing our theme for tonight, which is, of course, just a classroom teacher and the traditional stigma that continues surrounding this route, if you like, as a career path. One of the questions I just want to have a look from our listeners now that's come in. We've had some amazing questions, so I'm just going to pose these to you, Sarah. Welcome back. Hopefully you've had time to listen into the news and make a cuppa. Also, the news, there was some very controversial, really interesting topics there, actually, which I was just thinking about some future shows perhaps that we could touch on. But I mean, one of the things, ironically, that did come up was, of course, the really sad news that the poverty levels in the UK are the highest for 30 years, which is shocking, but also reality, unfortunately, I think, at the moment. And this is something that you picked up on earlier in terms of feeling not just societal pressures in terms of your role and ambition in your career, but also the financial pressures about moving from the classroom into more superior roles as well. Okay, so one of the questions then that's come out of the textings is, out of all the roles that you've done, Sarah, in your career to date, which have you enjoyed the most and the least? And that's from Tom Rogers, who's texting tonight. Thanks, Tom.
That's a really interesting question. And it's quite difficult, actually, because I wouldn't necessarily say that any of them I've enjoyed the least, or they've just been different experiences. Being a TA was exceptionally difficult, and that's because TAs are one of the most important roles within the school. They are definitely undervalued, and actually they are vital, a little bit like midday supervisors. And I think that I found it really difficult because it was almost an invisible role. And there was a teacher who once not told me off, I can't think of the correct way to say it, but she embarrassed me in front of an entire classroom full of teachers because I was supporting a child who really did need somebody next to him and needed that support. And I just at that moment thought, I can't do this because I really need all of these children to get the support that they need, and their needs need to be met. The teaching isn't necessarily inclusive, and if I'm having to be the one that's making it inclusive, then there's something wrong with the teaching altogether. So actually I found that role a real challenge, to try and be the voice of all of these children. The exams, the tests, the support in class, differentiation, and actually it was a very difficult role to do because you couldn't be everywhere. Definitely undervalued. So that, although it was a fantastic opportunity and a wonderful job in a great school, I just felt it was really difficult, and I wanted to be the one up at the front, making that difference, not the one sitting in the class listening, if that makes sense. And the role of the TA is definitely changing as well at the moment. I don't know what it's like everywhere else, but locally the role of the TA is changing so much due to the special needs that are coming into mainstream. Classroom TAs used to be seen as paint pot washers and display putter-uppers, whereas now the skill set needed to be a TA is almost as complex as the skill set needed to be a teacher, to be honest, because you use so much.
Yeah, so specialised, isn't it, as well? And that's a really interesting angle as well to look at in terms of development and roles within education as well. And I'm scribbling down notes here, Sarah, while you're talking, thinking of material for future podcasts. But I mean, if we have got any teaching assistants listening this afternoon, I mean, please, I'm sure they are the superheroes of the classroom and the school, aren't they? And they need a shout out. So no, thank you for mentioning that, and a really good answer to the question. And what have you enjoyed the most then so far?
And again, really difficult, but I think being a classroom teacher, it's just where my passion is. I I do miss the children to a certain extent in this role, but I just feel like being a classroom teacher, the ownership and the influence that you have over those children and the relationships that you build with them, it's just like nothing else. It's like you were saying about, I'm doing inverted commas, stepping down because you want to be back in the classroom. Actually, it's, if you're a good classroom teacher, why do you need to be sitting in your office looking at budgets all day? You need to be in the classroom with the children. And that was probably the role I've enjoyed the most. It was never my plan to be principal right now. And it was a difficult decision to make. But yeah, that was what I enjoyed the most.
Amazing. Thank you, Sarah. They're brilliant answers. And that leads me really quite nicely into another question from one of our listeners, Emma B. Good afternoon, Emma. Thank you for tuning in to Teachers Talk Radio this afternoon. So this is specifically for you, Sarah Curtis. Sarah C, not Sarah T. Do you, now, I'm assuming, Sarah, from our conversations prior to the show, I'm right in saying you have a non-teaching timetable as principal at your school?
I do, yes. Yeah.
Okay, so this is a good question from Emma B then. So do you miss being, and I think I know the answer to this from the previous thing you've just said, but do you miss being a classroom teacher?
I absolutely do miss being a classroom teacher in the day-to-day of what that means. However, I don't miss everything else that comes with it. So the carrying 60 books home every night to try and mark, and the writing of reports, and all of the hoops that teachers have to jump through. I miss the relationships that you build with the children as their classroom teacher, but I don't miss everything else that comes with being a classroom teacher. I'm quite lucky that we're in quite a small infant school, so I still have lots of contact with the children. I know all of their names. I'll talk to them. They know me. I know them, and it's a lovely environment to still have to be with them and every day. When I left my last school, it was a larger primary school. When I went to be deputy head, where I am now, the head teacher at the time said, "Oh, you're going to a nice little infant school," and did jazz hands while she said it. And actually, it stuck with me this whole time, because it was almost said, not negatively, because she wasn't like that, but it was said in a way of, "Oh yeah, go to a nice little infant school." And actually, I am in a nice little infant school. And what that means is that although I miss the classroom and that aspect of it, I've still got a lot of that within my role now. So I'm quite lucky in that sense, but I don't know what that would be like again in a larger school or a secondary school. So I think,
Yeah, no, great answer, Sarah, to that as well. And I think, I don't think I'm yet to meet in my career a senior leader who has a non-teaching role, or even somebody that's come out of teaching that really truthfully, hand on heart, can say that they don't miss being in the classroom, because you absolutely hit the nail on the head, Sarah. It's that connection, isn't it? And don't get me wrong, I know there are pastoral roles and senior leadership roles, and every role in a school setting, you can have that. That's why we work in schools, in those environments, to have that connection and make the difference on these young people and their lives and futures. But there's just something so special about having that direct and instantaneous connection and feedback when you're working so closely day in, day out with the class, isn't it? So I've got another question for you, Sarah, and this is a really interesting one as well here, and this is something going back again to understanding this stigma around staying in the classroom rather than progressing in the traditional way. So do you think, as principal, as an employer, do you think that employers may look at teachers who haven't progressed, who have no desire to progress to higher traditional roles in middle and senior leadership, as being lazy or unambitious? And that's from El Profesor. Thank you.
Absolutely not. I would say that all they've been doing in the time they've been a teacher is perfecting their skills and being the best teacher they can possibly be. Hopefully in that time they've accessed CPD and they've just loved every minute of it. But as I said earlier, it's a very demanding role. There's lots of things that happen outside of the classroom that is really difficult to manage. So if somebody applied to my school or hopefully any school and they'd just been a classroom teacher for their career, it just makes them a teacher who's probably seen the same initiatives come round 3 times, and they've perfected their art of delivering. I don't think it's lazy and I don't think it's unambitious. I think it's a fantastic place to be, standing in front of the class every day and sharing your knowledge and building those relationships. So personally, no, not lazy at all, not unambitious at all, just wonderful to have people that want to be in that role.
And this takes you back again to Aoife, at the start of the show, and just through, even you don't know Aoife, but just, I'm sure you could appreciate just through that clip, her enthusiasm and just her contentment and fulfillment of being a classroom teacher. And she has no aspirations, she says herself, to progress the traditional career path, but that she's challenging herself all the time. And I think that's another point to make as well, Sarah. I don't know if you agree with this, but we, as you say, it's so important to celebrate these amazing classroom practitioners that we have in every school. But it's also really, really important to offer, like you said earlier, the correct coaching and ensure that our quality assurance systems are solid, in the sense that we can help the teachers to grow as well and to find their own fulfillment in their own careers and their own professional development as well. Talk me, I know the show's not specifically on professional development, but I do think that this is a big part, certainly for me, in my fulfillment as a classroom teacher, having tailored and really effective and interesting CPD. What do you do at your school in terms of CPD? Is it, a sort of one size fits all, or do you allow some sort of autonomy from your classroom teachers and staff in terms of their CPD?
Thank you. That's a really good question. And it's our CPD is very flexible, based on what's happening in school in that moment. So I've known some heads, the previous head, and some heads map out their CPD for the entire year. But we will do it half-termly, and I think that it just responds to the needs. So for example, everything's gone out of the window this year at school. There was lots of things to do with the curriculum that I wanted to do based on our most recent Ofsted. But actually, we've had a really high number of SEN, very complex SEN children come to school. So everything we have done this half term and last half term has been around SEN support, and the teachers have really engaged well with it, because it's what they're feeling, it's what they're coming to me and saying that they need. Prior to that, we did a lot on EAL and how to support EAL children, and that again, it's just responding to what's happening in the classrooms, what's happening within the school, or what I foresee being a challenge for the teachers next. So if there's teachers who require extra CPD because of the dreaded word, a bit of monitoring has happened, and I have noticed there's a bit of a gap, then that's up to me then to fit that in. And it will be personalised, or I might offer it to them individually. It might be coaching, it might be team teaching, it might be doing some work in triads or partnering up with a partner teacher, or it could be whole school CPD. But generally, where we are anyway, we respond to what's happening within the classroom or within the school, and I think that's been difficult. That's been a change, because you never really know what's happening next. I'll always encourage staff to do the higher level, the MPQs, because when I did my MPQSL, I found that really really useful, really supportive, and a great way of networking again and meeting just like-minded people wanting to progress. So I'd always share those opportunities and opportunities within the trust as well. But instead of just sharing it as a blanket, I will target individual class teachers and say, look, there's an opportunity here for growth or development, not necessarily a pay rise as such, but just the recognition and actually leading without a title, which I think again is really, really important, and again for their own CPD. But yeah, very, very tailored, I would say, but in a whole school sort of way, if that makes sense. So a bit of both.
Yeah, I think you're right. From experience of 3 different schools in my career and CPD organised in very different ways. I think for senior leaders, correct me if I'm wrong here, Sarah, but for senior leaders, it is a bit of it's a complexity getting it right for everybody, isn't it? And I think you're right. I think it's having that balance and being on the shop floor, if you like, and listening to your staff and listening to the classroom teachers who are the experts in their fields, we hope, and try to encourage them to be. And like you said, responding to the needs and the changing needs all the time of the students in front of you as well, and your staff, of course. One of the things as well that I want to mention that you said, Sarah, just then was networking opportunities. I'm a huge advocate of my own CPD, regardless of whether the school that I'm at is offering it or not. I am interested. I mean, ask my husband. I've always got my nose in a book on some latest educational theory or leadership strategy, but it's something that genuinely interests me. And there are so many teachers out there and leaders like that, and it is wonderful to see. It really is. And networking, I think, it died a death, unfortunately, during COVID, because we weren't able to get together, and I think it lost a lot of its significance. I remember when I first started teaching, it was a huge part of my career and the department that I was in, and we would go often to other schools and other MFL departments and network, and that really is how I learned a lot about teaching, to be honest, because it's all right doing a webinar every now and again, but you want to learn from the people in the classroom, or the people that have been there and done that and have put it into practice. As I said earlier on in the show, that it's not just the reading and research that's important, it's does it work? And if it doesn't, how can we adapt that to the needs that we have in front of us? And I guess in the UK, I know a lot of schools now, junior schools, infant schools and senior schools, are part of big academy trusts and MATs. And so do you think that is working in the UK in terms of upskilling our classroom teachers, the networking opportunities? Is it happening as it should be across the academies?
I think that it could be better. There is a lot of networking that happens within trusts, but there's not a lot of cross-trust. So if you think that trusts will generally follow the same principles and they will often share CPD, and you'll have senior trust leaders who will come and support and work with teachers and join together, they might know more about another school, so they'll say, oh, it would be great for you to go to that school, but actually there's not a lot of cross-trust working. And I know that from my own children being at different junior and secondary schools, I know that they do some things that are absolutely fantastic, and as a school leader I would love to send some of my staff across to their schools, but in a way that's potentially frowned upon or not the done thing, because we should be growing our own within our trust. So networking opportunities are definitely there, and I encourage it with the staff. I mean, I would love my staff to pick up books and do some research. I we've got a couple of WhatsApp groups, but don't worry, there's no messages after 6 and none on weekends. But I will often be on Twitter, X, whatever it's called, or I will be on Instagram because there's some fantastic posts on there, and I'll be sharing research, and you just want them to want to go and develop it. But again, that comes down to the workload pressures of being a classroom teacher. I've got time to do research, I've got time to read books. And actually, is that the difference then between the leadership and the classroom teacher? So do I need to do my own CPD and then share that with my teachers rather than the expectation that they do their own? Because that's an extra workload pressure of a classroom teacher. So then you sort of think, actually, then let me get back in the classroom and I'll send you on a training course or give you an afternoon each half term to go and do some reading. But it's tricky. It is tricky, but it's something that needs to be done better.
And I'm going to address the elephant in the room now a little bit. And workload, you mentioned. I mean, I don't think we can have a podcast on Teachers Talk Radio without mentioning the workload. And we have talked about the incredible talent that we have in our schools, in the classroom, and the exact reasons why we shouldn't be fast tracking our amazing teachers out of the classroom. But workload is an issue for a lot of teachers and leaders in education. Of course it is, and probably, as we've seen from the DfE, one of the main reasons why we're losing some of our best classroom teachers and leaders. So in terms of workload, Sarah, we've had a question in from Jess. Thanks so much, Jess, for listening this afternoon. So as principal and SLT, how do you maintain a good understanding of the workload of a classroom teacher? Obviously, you're not in the classroom. So how do you, I mean, you touched upon it then in terms of, you can't have the expectation that your staff are going to go away and have the time to read or enforce that on them. But how do you keep a foot on the ground, as to say, in terms of being in the classroom and understanding the enormity of the job?
I think it's difficult, but what it comes down to is openness of staff and me being approachable, so that if I'm aware of a particular pressure point in the year, or if there's a lot happening, that actually it is more around those relationships that I've got with the staff, and that they will come to me and say, blimey, Sarah, there's a lot on our timeline over the next 2 weeks, and I will address it. And I think post-COVID, there has been an increase in workload, and that's down to the behaviour, mental health, and the sort of SEN support that classroom teachers are having to do, and with the external services not offering as much as they used to. I would absolutely say that it's that side of it that's increasing teacher workload at the moment. I think I read recently that teachers work around 26 hours for free a week. Wow. Imagine doing that in any other job. They'd have flexi time every week. I just think that in order to address the workload, I've got to understand it, and I can't address it unless I understand it, and that's what's really important, is that I map things out, and that staff do come and talk to me, because
communication, isn't it?
Absolutely
key. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm conscious of time. Time has flown this afternoon, Sarah, and I want to thank you again for giving up your precious Sunday to be on Teachers Talk Radio on my debut podcast. But it has been so interesting, and it's one of those things that you can plan for hours and hours. But actually, what I love about podcasts, the ones that I listen to, and tonight's is the fact that it's so unpredictable, and the topics of conversation are so juicy and interesting, and that's what's happened this afternoon. So I want to thank you so much for all of your contributions. So the final section that I really want to discuss tonight, Sarah, with you then, in regards to just a classroom teacher here, is the reframing of the success and the celebration of classroom teaching. So as a senior leader then, how do we redefine this success in education beyond the typical, you're a middle leader, you're a senior leader?
I think that actually getting into teaching in the first place is a huge success. If you remember those, did you have to do those maths and English tests that you had about 30 seconds to answer those questions?
Yes. Do they still exist? Do we still
I
do
don't know
those?
if they do anymore, but my
This is
goodness.
why we need some ECT to call in and talk to the old timers here. Yeah.
Something else. But I just think actually stop promoting accomplishments for accomplishment's sake, and let's focus on education in the whole, and the whole sense of that. Let's promote well-being of staff and well-being of children. Let's be more inclusive around it, and actually that's for the staff and the pupils. So success is the relationships that you've built with those children. Nobody goes into teaching for a sticker every time they've done something good. It's not instant gratification, is it? It's those long-term goals, those children who have been successful, gone through school, and then come through the system, and then they're an ECT in the same school that they, and actually that is success. It's not around having a title. It's around your behaviours. So your leadership behaviours, whether you've got a title or not, you can still lead. You can still be a lead teacher. You can still blog, network. You can do your educational research. You can organise things, even if it's just a staff event, staff social, because how important are they? You can deliver training. You can coach. You can mentor. That is you as a successful teacher. That is you showing everybody what a phenomenal individual you are. You just don't have a title for it, but actually that is leadership. It just goes back to your behaviour.
And I think as well, like leadership skills, although we were trained as teachers, classroom teachers, you're absolutely right in developing these leadership skills actually in the classroom to prepare you for any future roles should you wish to pursue them, because essentially the same skills, the teamwork and the quality assurance and the communication you use with your students day in, day out, don't you? And we're advocates of those for our students to be these lifelong learners, to teach them the leadership skills that they need as well. So it's almost like this really great sort of educational cycle, isn't it? We're all teaching each other, and like you say, and the actual value of it, and that, I'm going to go back to your phrase because I love it, that warm feeling in your belly is that moment where you realize that you have made a difference, as cliche as it sounds, but it is the ECT coming in that you taught however many years ago, even if it makes you feel really old when that happens. But yes, you have definitely touched a life there. So yeah. The last sort of thing before we finish then, that I wanted to have a look at and discuss with you. So we're looking at this idea of reframing success then as a classroom teacher. The sort of flip side to that then, I guess, is a conversation that I was having with a colleague the other day, and they super ambitious in terms of taking the traditional middle leadership into senior leadership, and they were saying to me, I've applied for X, Y, and Z, but I really think that I need to get my MPQSL, or I really think that I need my MA. So it's a difficult one. I'm playing devil's advocate a little bit here, Sarah, but it's a difficult one because as much as I agree with you, and I think that leadership skills are intrinsic in a lot of people, and that you do it as classroom teachers naturally day in, day out, I also think that it's quite competitive in some schools and in education. And without those titles, I mean, you're the principal, Sarah, you tell me, would you be willing to accept somebody into senior leadership without an MPQSL or a master's in education?
Ooh, it would all depend what was on the person's spec. And that I can really relate to that, because I went to an interview when I was starting to apply for assistant and deputy head roles, and bearing in mind the rules around interviews and having to ask all the candidates the same question, I'd absolutely smashed. When you just walk out of an interview and smash my presentation, did an assembly, did this, did data analysis, did it all, felt really confident, sat in the interview, and the chair of governors said, "So you've only been teaching a couple of years, how do you think the other staff will respond to you?" And I thought, I'm sure you can't ask me that, because that you can't ask everyone else that, because they might have been teaching a lot longer. And I wasn't successful, and I am sure that's why. And at the time, I hadn't got my NPQSL. So whether I'd got that or not, would that have made a difference, or was I just being questioned on the time that I'd spent teaching? I think NPQSLs help. I think NPQHs help, but I also know that sometimes they can be quite easily obtained, and how much they develop somebody as a person can be questionable. Some people give it their all, whereas some people would just be doing it just to tick a box. So it's again, the person with the NPQSL who's done it just to tick a box, or the person who hasn't got an NPQSL, the one without might be the better teacher, therefore they might be the better leader.
Yeah, absolutely. Taking it on individual basis, I think, is so important, isn't it? Yeah, brilliant. Right, I am going to round it up, because we could talk all night, Sarah, as we normally do when we catch up. So I just want to take this opportunity to thank you again for being my super special guest on my debut podcast with Teachers Talk Radio. In summary, I mean, what a journey we've come along this evening. And I just want to thank you all, listeners and special guests alike, Aoife included, who I know will be listening back to this as soon as she can, from the bottom of my heart, for all of the support and the contributions and the amazing insights that we've had, and really interesting conversations. Thank you to Teacher Talk Radio for this amazing opportunity this afternoon as well. And it has given me so many ideas for future content and future podcasts and discussions that I would love to have with the teaching and learning community as well. I hope you have a wonderful weekend. I certainly hope to return to leadership roles in the future personally. But for now, I'm really excited to continue growing my talent and expertise, just inverted commas, as a classroom teacher. So I will leave you now, Sarah, and thank you again. And I will speak to you really soon.
Thank you very much. I just want to give you a quote before I go that I read from the Education Support Charity.
Absolutely.
We have to look after ourselves and those around us if great teachers are to keep teaching. And I just think that's really important.
Yeah, absolutely. What a quote. Thank you, Sarah. That was the perfect end. Thank you to leave everybody with. Thanks again, guys. And hopefully catch up soon in 2 weeks' time, where I will be discussing a deep dive into middle leadership, discussing the pivotal role of our middle leaders and exploring the highs and lows of middle leadership in education. Thanks so much. And please do email your questions in on the socials ready for the next show. Good night and have a great week ahead.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.